Have you ever been in a situation where you just, I don't know, feel like you're seeing things completely differently from everyone else?
Hmm.
Like you're all looking at the same thing, maybe, but the picture you've got in your head, it just doesn't quite line up with what others are saying.
That feeling, yeah, that
Mhm.
sense of being kind of uniquely inside your own experience.
Exactly. And what if it's not just about, perspective, but something deeper, something fundamental about how our minds actually work?
It's interesting you start there because that very feeling, that individual internal world, the sense that what's happening for you is really just for you in that specific way.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay, good. Let's unpack it then. We're doing a deep dive today into this idea from the Abstractionist papers called the biological blindfold.
Right. The biological blindfold.
So the core idea, as I understand it, is that our minds are constantly like building our experience from the inside, almost
Yeah.
like your brain's a movie studio.
Okay, a movie studio. I like that analogy. Yeah, constantly filming, editing, adding the soundtrack to your reality, sights, sounds, feelings, the whole package. But here's the kicker.
Uh,
The studio itself, the cameras, the editing suite, the processes, it's all hidden. We don't see it working. We only ever see the finished movie.
hence the blindfold.
Exactly. It creates this blindfold where the world we experience, this internally made movie, feels like it's just reality, like we're looking directly out a window, not watching a screen built inside.
And crucially, that internal construction the book calls it your individual red space. That might be key to understanding that feeling you mentioned, being on a different wavelength.
How so?
Well, if each of us is essentially living inside our own self-generated movie, our own red space,
Hmm.
then the assumption that we're all watching the same movie or even looking out the same window starts to wobble a bit, doesn't it?
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And that's really the mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To really get to grips with this biological blindfold idea
Yeah, to explore how it works.
and how it shapes those really fundamental human things like why do we feel so alone sometimes, even in a crowd?
Mhm.
Why do misunderstandings happen all the time? And this idea of unawareness. Are we really not aware of how much our minds are, well, constructing things?
That's a big part of it, the unawareness.
And we want to explore why this is seen as such a potentially revolutionary way of thinking. And just for listeners, the source for all this, the Abstractionists' papers, it's available online.
That's right, freely available at www.welcometothe.bluespace.com for anyone who wants to, read the original argument.
So this whole idea that our perception might not be the full picture, it's not totally new, is it? I mean, people bring up things like Plato's cave.
That's a classic, yeah.
Yeah.
Plato's cave. The idea of people chained up only seeing shadows on a wall.
Right, and those shadows are their reality. They don't know anything else.
And then you have, more modern takes like The Matrix,
Hmm.
living inside a simulation.
Yeah, where everything you sense is just code, basically. Artificial input, both great thought experiments about questioning reality.
Definitely. They make you question what's real, but
Yeah,
there's a key difference compared to the biological blindfold concept.
okay.
Both Plato's cave and The Matrix, they sort of assume a single illusion that everyone shares. One set of shadows, one computer program.
Ah, I see. One shared false reality.
Exactly. And behind it, there's this idea of one true reality waiting to be discovered if you can just, break free or take the red pill.
Okay, so how does the biological blindfold differ then?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The biological blindfold suggests something much more, well, personal. Instead of one shared illusion,
Uh-huh.
it proposes that each mind, each one of us, is actively and independently constructing its own internal world, its own red space.
So it's not like we're all watching slightly different versions of the same shadow play.
Yeah.
It's more like we're each in our own private cinema,
Uh-huh.
watching a completely unique film that our own brain produced.
That's a great way to put it. Precisely. Everything you can access, your thoughts, memories, feelings, how you interpret what you see and hear, all of that exists within your personal red space.
And it feels totally real and complete to me inside my red space.
Absolutely. It feels self-contained. You don't experience your thoughts as interpretations or your memories as reconstructions in the moment, do you?
No, not usually. They just feel true, like direct access.
Exactly. And that leads us back to the blindfold itself.
Yeah.
The mind does this incredible construction job, but it doesn't show its work.
Right. No behind the scenes tour.
No. We don't perceive the neural processes, the cognitive mechanisms generating the experience. We just get the end result.
And because we don't see the mechanisms, we naturally assume what?
We assume that our constructed experience is the real deal. that our personal red space is just a clear window onto, well, onto whatever is out there. The book calls the actual domain of interaction blue space.
Okay, blue space. So red space is internal, blue space is external, shared.
Blue space is the shared domain of interaction, where cause and effect happen, objectively you could say, before interpretation kicks in.
Now, the abstractionists' papers brings up paradoxes, like the chicken and the egg or the ship of Theseus, those philosophical puzzles. How do they fit in?
Well, the idea is that paradoxes like those might actually be clues. They show the limits of our internal models, our red space logic, when we try to apply them directly to the underlying reality, the blue space.
So they feel puzzling because our internal rulebook doesn't quite match the rules of the actual game.
Kind of, yeah. It's like our logical frameworks, built within red space, hit a wall when they encounter the fundamental nature of things in blue space. They reveal the edges of our constructed understanding.
Like little error messages telling us our internal map isn't perfectly matching the territory.
That's one way to think about it, yes. They hint that our experienced reality is a representation, and representations have boundaries and blind spots.
Okay, so let's nail down this red space, blue space thing. Red space, my private internal universe of experience and interpretation.
Correct.
Blue space, the shared arena where actual stuff happens, where interactions occur, like physical events.
Exactly. Cause and effect, independent of how anyone perceives it. A ball hits another ball in blue space. Sound waves travel in blue space.
And the book uses the term orthogonal to describe the relationship. What's that mean here? Orthogonal.
Yeah.
Like at right angles in math.
Yeah, it's borrowed from that idea. It means they are fundamentally distinct domains. They operate on different axes, so to speak. They don't overlap or directly map onto each other in a simple way.
So interaction happens in blue space.
Right.
But the meaning, the experience of that interaction happens entirely within an individual's red space.
Precisely. My speaking creates sound waves, that's blue space. Your brain processing those waves, interpreting my words, feeling an emotion about it, that's all red space activity.
And crucially, I can't tack into your red space. I don't have, like, a direct feed to see how you're interpreting this right now.
Exactly. Yeah. No direct access. That's fundamental. And this separation, this inherent privacy of red space is a major source of, well, difficulty in communication.
Ah, okay. Because we all get signals from the same blue space, the same events happen out there, but we process them through totally unique red space filters. Our own internal movie studios are using different scripts, maybe.
Different scripts, different directors, different past experiences, coloring the interpretation. Yeah.
This really changes how you think about communication, then. We sort of act like we beam thoughts directly into each other's heads with words.
We do, don't we?
Yeah.
But according to this model, that's not what's happening at all.
So what is happening when we talk?
Well, think about it. Communication starts as an intention inside my red space.
Okay.
I then translate that intention into a signal in blue space, speaking words, making a gesture, writing something down.
The physical act.
That signal travels through blue space and reaches your senses. But here's the key. The meaning doesn't travel with the signal like a package.
It doesn't. So the meaning isn't in the words themselves?
Not inherently, no.
No.
The receiving mind, your mind, in this case, takes that blue space signal, the sound waves, and then constructs its own interpretation inside your red space, based entirely on your own models, your history, your expectations, your current state.
Wow. Okay, so the meaning is created by the receiver, not delivered by the sender.
Essentially, yes. The sender creates a signal intended to provoke a certain meaning, but the actual meaning experienced is always constructed internally by the receiver.
The book has that example, right? With Bob, John, and Yoko.
Ah, yes, that illustrates it well. Same external event in blue space. Let's say Yoko makes a comment.
Okay.
That comment, the sound waves, reaches both Bob and John. Same blue space input.
Oh, good.
But maybe based on his past interactions with Yoko or his general outlook, here's it as a simple observation. Neutral. No big deal.
Okay.
John, however, perhaps feeling insecure or having different expectations, interprets the exact same sound waves as criticism. He feels offended.
And Yoko, who made the comment?
Yoko had her own intention in her red space, which might have been totally different again. Maybe she meant it kindly, or maybe she didn't even think much about it.
So one blue space event, the comment triggers 3 completely different red space realities, different interpretations, different emotional responses.
Precisely. Because their internal models, their red space architectures, are unique. The meaning wasn't in Yoko's words floating through the air. It was built inside Bob's head and inside John's head.
Yep. So that really highlights the separation, and it connects back directly to those human condition problems we mentioned earlier.
Right, the biological blindfold, keeping us locked in our own red spaces, unable to directly share or verify experiences.
It explains that feeling of loneliness, doesn't it? Even if I'm with people, my internal world, my movie, is fundamentally mine alone, and theirs is theirs. There's an unbridgeable gap in direct experience.
It certainly suggests why that feeling can be so persistent, yes.
Yes.
And misunderstanding. Well, it almost becomes the default, doesn't it?
Because we just assume everyone else sees it the way we do. We project our red space interpretation onto them.
We tend to, yeah. We forget, or we're simply unaware, that their internal landscape, their way of constructing meaning from blue space signals, could be vastly different.
And the unawareness part, that's the blindfold itself doing its job, hiding the construction process.
Exactly. It hides its own operations. So we mistake our interpretation, our red space construction, for objective reality, for blue space itself. We think we're seeing the territory when we're actually just looking at our own internal map.
And we're not usually aware we're even holding a map, let alone drawing it ourselves.
Well put. Yes.
So why is this framed as revolutionary? People have talked about subjective experience forever. What makes the biological blindfold concept different, a game changer?
I think the revolutionary angle is the strong emphasis on the active, independent construction happening in each mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that our view of a single objective reality is flawed or filtered.
Mm-hmm.
It's suggesting something more radical, that we are each generating functionally separate experiential realities, our red spaces, plural, parallel almost.
So reality as we experience it isn't just out there, perceived imperfectly.
Well, it's actively built in here, inside each of us. That shift from passive perception, even flawed perception, to active construction is quite fundamental.
That is a big shift. It changes how you have to think about, well, everything, yourself, others, disagreements.
It really does. If you truly take on board the idea of the biological blindfold, the independence of red spaces, it potentially fosters a different kind of empathy, maybe.
How so?
Well, you start to see that when someone disagrees with you or has a totally different reaction, it's not necessarily that one of you is right and the other wrong about objective reality.
It's more that your internal constructions, based on the same blue space input, are just fundamentally different.
Exactly. It stems from those different internal architectures, different histories, different models, and allows for more nuance, less immediate judgment, perhaps.
That could certainly change how we approach conflicts or misunderstandings.
And the Abstractionist papers suggest this framework isn't just about individual psychology. It claims it extends to understanding larger systems, collective behavior, even the nature of causation itself. That's explored more in later parts of the text.
Okay, so it's a foundational concept with broader implications.
Seems to be, yes.
Yeah.
This idea of the blindfold is presented as a sort of key to unlocking a different way of looking at many complex issues.
All right, so let's try and wrap this up. The big takeaway here seems to be this biological blindfold idea proposes that our experience isn't a direct window onto the world.
Not at all. It's an internal construction, a personal movie.
And this construction happens automatically, unconsciously, hiding its own processes.
Right, the blindfold effect.
And this has huge implications for why we feel lonely, why we misunderstand each other so often, and why we're generally unaware of just how subjective our reality is.
It provides a potential underlying mechanism for those very common human experiences, yes.
Okay. And again, for listeners wanting to go deeper, the source material, the Abstractionist papers with all the details on red space, blue space, and other related concepts like incoherence.
Which is another fascinating idea.
It's all available free online at www.welcometothebluespace.com.
That's the place.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with, now that you've heard about this biological blindfold, how might that awareness, just knowing about the concept, maybe subtly change things?
Mm-hmm.
How might it shift how you think about your own thoughts and feelings, or how you approach interacting with other people and their seemingly separate, sometimes confusing realities?
It definitely puts empathy and the challenge of bridging those internal worlds into a new light, doesn't it? How do we connect across fundamentally separate red spaces?
It really does. Plenty to think about there. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating topic.